Mr. Lausch.
Thank you, and thank you all for being here. We are here today to announce charges in a federal indictment that was unsealed this morning, which charged 5 individuals with federal crimes relating to the August 4th, 2020 murder of Chicago rapper Carlton Weekly, who's also known as FBG Duck. Charges also relate to the shooting of 2 other individuals during that same attack. The indictment charges 5 individuals with an offense that's known as violent crime in aid of racketeering offenses, which is commonly known as VICAR. The 5 individuals charged are Charles Liggins, Kenneth Roberson, DeCarlos Offord, Christopher Thomas, and Marcus Smart. And more specifically, that indictment alleges that these 5 individuals were members or associates of the O Block Street Gang, which is the racketeering enterprise that's alleged in the indictment. And the indictment further alleges that these individuals murdered Mr. Weekly as part of their effort to maintain or increase their position in the O Block. The indictment also alleges that the O Block Street Gang sought to promote and enhance the enterprise and the enterprise's members and associates' activities in various ways, to include publicly claiming responsibility for acts of violence committed by the enterprise, taunting rival gang members, and also alleges that the O Block enterprise sought to increase its status through the use of social media platforms and music. In addition to this, the first count, which involves the murder, the indictment also charges the defendants with conspiracy to commit that murder, various assault offenses related to the same shooting incident, as well as firearms offenses related to discharging those firearms during and in relation to those federal crimes of violence. I would like to thank our law enforcement partners for their outstanding work that allowed us to bring these charges, most notably the Federal Bureau of Investigation and the Chicago Police Department. Outstanding work by these individuals. We also received important assistance from the Cook County State's Attorney's Office in this case. And finally, I would like to commend the work of the Assistant U.S. Attorneys who led this prosecution team, including Al Berry, Anne Marie Yersani, and Jason Julian, who's my colleague who's here with me today. Our investigation of this murder, of the other activity by the O Block Street Gang and other gangs in this part of the city will remain ongoing. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to the Superintendent, David Brown, for some additional comments.
Thanks, John, and thank you for your partnership in hosting us here today. The most important job we have at Chicago Police Department is to make sure the people of this great city are not only safe, but feel safe. A majority of the senseless violence being perpetrated in our communities is due to gang violence, petty conflicts, and illegal narcotics sale. As we work toward making our neighborhoods safer, we're working with our federal partners, our state and county law enforcement to identify and dismantle the criminal networks responsible for these crimes. As we mentioned several weeks ago, we are going after gangs in this city. This includes gang investigations, narcotics investigations, and gun investigations. We are working together to hold gang members accountable for violence. We're working hand in hand to stop the flow of drugs and guns. We are working with our federal partners through our gun investigations team, which is focused on stopping the pipeline of illegal firearms. We're also working with our federal partners to apprehend carjackers and hold them accountable for their crimes. And our joint carjacking task force, as an aside, is why we have more than 1,000 offenders arrested so far this year. All of us here today, because we are trying to eliminate crime and the fear of crime. That's why we're here today. And this announcement today is just one example of the cooperation and collaboration that holds violent offenders accountable for their actions so that they cannot go on and hurt more people and take away more lives. I want to close with, we are going after gangs in this city. I'd now like to turn it over to Special Agent in Charge, Emerson Bowie, Jr. from the FBI Chicago Field Office. Emerson.
Superintendent. Good afternoon. Welcome to the FBI. I would just like to underscore, first and foremost, the partnerships and the relationships that have been forged between local, state, federal law enforcement, as well as the state and the federal prosecutors with the U.S. Attorney's Office and the Cook County State's Attorney's Office. Without these partnerships and these relationships that have been forged, we would not be able to bring to bear the types of investigations that we are currently doing and pursuing to ensure that the people of Chicago feel safe in their own community. We defend those who can't defend themselves. And this should send a strong message to the element in the Chicago area that would like to see people not be able to enjoy the city, their neighborhoods, their schools. We're not going to tolerate that. This should send a clear message. There are a number of ways we can pursue you, and we pursue every avenue possible to do so. And we will continue to do that. I hope this investigation and these charges that are being brought give some kind of peace to the families and friends of the victims. It's very unfortunate. I hope that these charges today bring some kind of peace to other members of the city who frequent the same areas that these crimes continue to occur in, and them knowing that we are working our hardest, we're working diligently, and we're working around the clock to rid Chicago's streets of these gangs and the violence that unfortunately plagues us from time to time. I'd like to thank you for attending this press conference, and I'll open the podium up to any questions that you may have.
So there were a number of individuals who were taken into custody on the south side of Chicago early this morning. I think there were 4 individuals. There's a 5th individual who is in state custody right now. It is not appearing yet. Yes. I believe 3 of the 4 were taken into custody there. 3 of the 4 were taken into custody there. Yes. Any other questions?
Why is it that this is an FBI endeavor versus the Cook County State's Attorney standing in the podium?
Yep. So what happens actually pretty frequently is when we have shootings, acts of violence, carjackings, we are involved. When I say we, I'm talking federally. U.S. attorneys, assistant U.S. attorneys, the FBI, and the other federal agencies to work with the Chicago Police Department as to what we can do to help. And this is one of those cases. This is a case, without getting into the substance of everything we did in the investigation, because we're going to stick within the 4 corners of the indictment. But this was one of those cases we were able to bring federal resources to bear to work with the Chicago Police Department to ultimately help us make the case. And here, the reason why it's charged federally is because we were able to establish evidence to indicate that there was a racketeering enterprise here that was involved, and this murder was done in furtherance of that, and so federal charges were appropriate.
Do you expect that this could be a tactic that will be used more often given the proliferation of violence in connection with gangs?
I think this is a tactic and the type of charges that we will continue to use. We've used it actually quite a bit so far. There's a number of cases that we where we've charged either RICO conspiracy, or simply VICARS, which is, a murder or shooting in furtherance of a racketeering enterprise. And we have a handful of those cases that we've charged federally. There's a case that's on trial right now, which is a RICO conspiracy case as well.
Are these individuals considered low-level members or high-level members? What kind of blow is this to that gang organization?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to answer that. It doesn't come within the 4 corners of what's charged in the indictment. But here's what I will say directly in response to that. Anyone who is involved in shooting and murdering somebody else, which is what is alleged in the indictment here, that is a critical member of that particular gang or enterprise. And so in that sense, this is a significant charge. Again, sir, I understand why you're asking that question. That's not within the four corners of what we've charged here, and so that's not something that I'm going to be able to respond to directly. Okay, and let me answer that more generally as opposed to in this specific case. Although you can read the indictment in this case, and there's publicly available material where I think you can learn more about the activities of certain individuals. But generally speaking, what's happening on social media and what's happening in music videos that are on YouTube, particularly in the drill rap genre, it shows you what's happening in this city. It shows you exactly what's happening in the city, which is that people are threatening to commit acts of violence and then either bragging about acts of violence or talking about how they're going to retaliate for other acts of violence. And it's happening on a regular basis. And so, again, that is why it is significant that, as law enforcement, we're able to investigate and then ultimately hold people accountable for their acts they're committing. But for instance, you can go on the internet right now. You can see people in music videos, guns all over the place, talking about who they've shot or who they're going to shoot.
Yes. Good afternoon.
How concerned are you about retaliation in the streets or violence? And the second part of that question would be that potential violence coming on the eve of this vaccination mandate made with CTV, where you may have limited resources. Are you going to go to 12-hour laws? How is that handled?
So I wouldn't want to conflate the two separate issues, which are two totally separate issues. But we're always concerned about retaliatory violence in this city. It is one of the drivers of violence, regardless of whether we have a Vicar case or not. We're always concerned about retaliatory violence. We're always street justice driving our violence. So that's separate and apart from this charging document today. We can discuss all. This is going after is possible that we can show evidence. We can discuss it off topic later. I want to stick to this charging document. I think it's a big enough deal to discuss this and not conflate the vaccination policy with the charging document today. No, later. The 15th is the deadline, and so we'll talk about it later if you don't mind. Not today, not after this press conference, but we'll schedule something and discuss all that with you. Okay? Thanks. Any other questions of me? Yes. The consequences, obviously, in the federal system are much more punitive than you can get anywhere. It is going to send a strong message. These people have been charged. Of course, they'll have their day in court. But this is the message we want to send, that you'll be held accountable to the highest possible provides, and that's what this case is an example of. And it's the message that we are serious about our collaboration together, the federal partners. As you heard, State's Attorney's Office was part of this collaboration, as well as county resources associated with it. We are all together working as a law enforcement partnership to go after gangs. And that's the message that with this charge, this Vicar RICO charge for murder is sending. Thank you. One of the things that we mentioned in our comments, I think all of us talked about, you know, how guns, gangs, and drugs really drive what's happening in Chicago and really in the country. And so we a lot of collaboration with our gun investigations team, focusing on gun trafficking, focus on a straw purchaser, focus on those that deal in blood money for guns to mete out violence in our city, as well as how obviously narcotics is involved with both the guns and the gang interactions that sometimes often lead to this type of violence. So it all works together. More to come. We're dedicated to this, committed. Chief Cato is standing to my left here. He is the new chief over counterterrorism. He comes from the west side of Chicago. He was over the 15th district and then over Area 4, which is the west side area. And that's a little bit of where we see a lot of what we're talking about today, driving the violence on the west side, and often you see it on the south side as well. But this is where we are as a law enforcement community, focused on addressing the violence in the city, going after gangs. Thank you.
John, can you talk about one more?
Talk about the social media aspect, not necessarily of this case, but in the big picture about how, you know, the bragging and the taunting and how that becomes a foundation in different cases to affect.
So it can become for cases, it can become evidence that we gather during the course of the case. But to kind of take the last two questions and kind of put them together, which I think might be a good way to sum up, right? So whenever you arrest gang members, there's always a risk that you create a vacuum, right? And that's what, you know, law enforcement, our first responders, our police officer and our federal agents, they are zeroed in on that, and they are trying to figure out, okay, where might the vacuum come, where might the retaliation come, and what can we do to try and prevent that? But here's the other thing that a case like this does. There are now 5 people in custody who weren't in custody before. 5 people who were alleged to have committed a murder in broad daylight in the middle of the afternoon in the city of Chicago, okay? And now it's known to them, and it's known to anybody else who might be committing similar acts of brazen violence, right? And who may that their day has come. They have been They will have their day in court. They are presumed innocent, but their day has come, and and there's a long end if we're able to prove them guilty, and that is significant, right? If this gives pause, even 1 minute of pause to somebody who might think it's a cool thing to do to get on video, to bring out some guns, let's talk about how I'm going to shoot somebody. If this gives pause to them, we're doing something good. We're doing a lot good, and we're going to continue to do more of this. Okay. Thank you very much. We appreciate it.